You folks ready for a real badass piece of American history? All right, here we go. Believe it or not, America's actually missing a nuclear bomb. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. They're actually missing a nuclear bomb. Now, this isn't merely a case of, they had 10 bombs in the evening and then they wake up in the morning and there's 9 bombs and, somebody lifted our nuclear bomb. It's a little bit different. Here's the story. So it's February 5th, 1958. And there's a United States bomber, a B-47, on a training mission, flying off the coast of Georgia and South Carolina. Now, its payload is a Mark 15 nuclear bomb. Now, this thing weighs 7,600 pounds and packs a punch. It's actually about 190 times more powerful than the bomb that the United States dropped on Nagasaki during World War II. So this thing packs a serious punch. Now, the jet's flying along at 2 o'clock in the morning at about 36,000 feet, again, off the East Coast over the Atlantic Ocean, when suddenly there's a collision. A United States Air Force F-86 fighter jet collides with the bomber. Now, the F-86 was also on a training mission. However, it was a training mission unrelated to the training mission that the bomber was on. Now, needless to say, both aircraft were badly damaged. In fact, the F-86 was so badly damaged, the pilot had to actually eject from 36,000 feet up. Now, here's a spoiler here. The pilot's okay. He made it down all right. His jet, on the other hand, not so well. It ended up crashing in a Georgia swamp. Now let's go back to the bomber, the B-47. Now, the B-47, of course, was also badly damaged. However, it was still flyable. So what the pilots do is immediately head to Hunter Air Force Base near Savannah, Georgia, and attempt to land the bomber. In fact, they try 3 times to land the bomber, but are unsuccessful. And they begin to realize that they've got a problem here. In fact, they've got a very big risk that they're running here. They may not be able to safely land the bomber carrying a 7,600-pound payload in the form of that Mark 15 nuclear bomb. So what they decide to do is radio for permission to actually release the bomb, drop the bomb off the coast of Georgia into the Atlantic Ocean. So they make the call, they get the permission they need, and then they head out over the Atlantic Ocean just off the coast of Georgia, just off of the opening of Wassaw Sound. And it's at that spot where they decide to release the nuclear bomb at an altitude of about 7,200 feet. Now, the jet's traveling at about 200 knots, approximately 200 miles an hour at that point, 190, 180 miles per hour at that point. The jet, of course, the bomber that is, flies back to Hunter Air Force Base outside Savannah and safely lands, so everybody's safe as far as that's concerned. So here's where the story gets very, very interesting. The very next day, February 6th, 1958, the United States Air Force decides, you know what? We kind of want our bomb back. So there is a series of searches that begin, starting with an enlistment of 100 Navy personnel searching for the nuclear bomb. Now, they have a pretty good idea where the bomb is because two of the pilots on the bomber noted the position of the aircraft at the time that the bomb was dropped. So they have a very good idea of where the bomb actually landed in the ocean. It can only go so far. But here's the kicker. The Navy searched with 100 men for 2.5 months and could never find the bomb. It's just gone. And when missing, it was never to be seen or heard from again. So it begs the question, where the hell is the nuclear bomb? What could have possibly happened to it? So here is the overlooked clue, in my opinion. Now, to start off with, I do not believe that the Soviet Union quickly swept in and retrieved the bomb and bolted back to Moscow or wherever they would go. I do not believe that a terrorist organization came along and swept in and picked up the bomb and went back to the Middle East or wherever they may happen to go. I also don't believe that it's likely that the United States military also retrieved the bomb and just simply didn't tell us about it for some unknown reason. It just defies common sense, doesn't make any sense at all as far as that's concerned there. So the bomb is still out there. The bomb is still out there somewhere. And again, we have a pretty good idea of exactly where the bomb is, because it's worth noting that that search area that they looked for 2.5 months was only about 3 square miles. So do the math on that. Think of how much time, how much effort you can spend on 3 square miles, on every square foot of that place, that piece of real estate, when you're only searching 3 square miles. And the other thing that's worth considering is that the sea at that point, the ocean at that point, is only about 20 feet deep. It fluctuates from about 15 feet deep up to maybe about 40 feet deep, but you're talking roughly 20 feet deep. So here's what the military thinks happened. The military thinks that the bomb was dropped to 7,200 feet, straightened out, went straight down, and just bored itself into the seafloor, probably 15 feet deep into the seafloor, and therefore kind of hidden from view. Now, here's the problem with that in my diseased mind. Let's say it is actually 15 feet burrowed into the seafloor, and let's say that the ocean is 20 feet deep at that point. Are we really supposed to believe that this 7,600-pound bomb, it's 12 feet long, it's the size of an SUV, but about double the weight? Are we really supposed to believe that you've got a chunk of metal that big, 35 feet from the surface of the ocean, and they can't find it? Their instruments cannot detect the missile, the nuclear warhead, the radiation signature, anything of that nature? That seems really, really hard to believe. So this is what I think happened here. Again, the overlooked clue in my mind is the fact that the bomb was dropped from 7,200 feet. Now, why is that important? That's important because 7,200 feet is high enough up where the bomb can right itself and start heading straight down by the time it hits the ocean. Importantly, when you drop a heavy object from 7,200 feet up, an object that is relatively streamlined, like the missile obviously is, it's going to take approximately 21 seconds before it hits the surface of the ocean. Also, notably, by the time it hits the surface of the ocean, it's traveling at a speed of approximately 400 miles per hour. So if you've got this missile traveling at a speed of 400 miles per hour, hitting the ocean, it's let's say 15, 20, 25 feet deep at this point, and then hitting the seafloor at a very high rate of speed, it seems virtually impossible that the thing did anything but basically get shattered into 200,000 or 300,000 pieces. Kind of like an airplane when it hits the ground, when it nosedives into the ground. We've seen what airplanes look like that nosedive into the ground. They shatter, there's nothing left. So what would make this bomb any different? So ultimately, I think that's what happened to the weapon here. I think that it was shattered into 200,000 or 300,000 pieces, strewn about the sea floor at that point. And to be sure, a lot of those pieces are probably 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet in the silt, buried in the silt, because of the sheer magnitude of the force involved with this thing crashing into the ocean, 400 miles per hour again, like I said. So I think that's the reason that nothing in the form of a whole bomb was actually found. So it does beg the question, did the United States military, did the Navy really find absolutely nothing at all? Or did they find fragments of it, but just simply couch it as we didn't find anything? Now, the only reason that that's possible, the only reason that that could have possibly been the rationale that they used, is because obviously the bomb contains radioactive materials. Now, one thing I should know that's critically important, there is some discrepancy with respect to whether the plutonium trigger was actually included with this particular bomb. It is possible that the bomb was flying without the plutonium trigger, therefore incapable of detonating. Now, having said that, I've read through quite a bit of materials related to this, and I think that it's likely that it actually did not contain the plutonium trigger. So that would not be on the bottom of the seafloor at this point, which is obviously good news. That said, there are still several hundred pounds of uranium, radioactive uranium, that would be on the seafloor. So perhaps the military, realizing that there would be a very costly expense to clean up, and who knows how that would affect, the perception of the nuclear weapons, arms race and industry and everything in the United States at this point during the throes of the Cold War. Maybe they figured, for reasons of just kind of like keeping things cool with the public, let's just say that we couldn't find a bomb. What it did is burrowed itself in the seafloor in all likelihood. It's not containing the plutonium trigger. The bomb is perfectly intact and is perfectly safe. No one has to worry about it. It's not going to explode. Georgia and South Carolina are going to be there in the morning. Don't worry if you live in Savannah. We're all good. So that is a possibility. But there's a couple of things that the United States military has done and said, actually, in the intervening years that make me question that. First of all, just months after the 2.5-month search was concluded, they submitted a letter to Congress, and they described the bomb as being irretrievably lost. That's the term that they used, irretrievably lost. Now, what's notable is they didn't say that the bomb is missing. They didn't say that we couldn't find it. They merely said that the bomb was irretrievably lost. Now, needless to say, if the bomb indeed is shattered into 200,000 or 300,000 pieces strewn about the seafloor, yeah, it's irretrievably lost. You're not recovering that bomb anytime soon. So that's just an interesting way to describe what's going on here, especially when you consider the word irretrievably. How could they possibly know that was irretrievably lost if indeed it was still in its whole form, if it hadn't shattered upon hitting the ocean floor? How do they know that 30, 40 years later, 50 years later, they don't find the bomb and it's, 2 feet below the surface of the, sea floor and they just pull it up? I mean, again, it's only in 20, 30 feet deep of water. So the fact that they considered irretrievably lost is kind of a remarkable thing. I think it tells a story. The other thing is in intervening years and later decades, as they've searched for the bomb or they've looked into it, they actually haven't searched for the bomb. The one thing that they have done, specifically in the early 2000s, is they were looking for radiation. They're interested in radiation. Is there any radiation? So that's interesting that they seem to be concerned about possible radiation more than actually finding the bomb. Now, this is 2025, folks. It's really, really, really hard for me to believe that they wouldn't be able to find the bomb today. So the overlooked clue, I think the critical piece, the overlooked clue here, for our purposes, is the fact that the bomb was dropped at 7,200 feet. And if we just focus on that, if we focus on that fact, dropping a bomb at 7,200 feet, what that means, it means that the bomb rights itself, enters the ocean going straight down, it's traveling at about 400 miles per hour. It hits an area of the ocean where the water is very shallow, 20 feet deep, 25 feet deep, maybe 15 feet deep, and hits the seafloor. How could the bomb have done anything but shattered into 200,000 or 300,000 pieces? Doesn't make sense to me. That is your overlooked clue.